Welcome back, everybody. This is Modern Randy. I am Randy, and today I'm doing a standard meta breakdown from this past weekend. Kind of just going over what we saw, what got played, and what's going on with the standard meta, especially since, Modern RCQ season is ending. We have standard RCQ season getting ready to start, as well as Foundations getting ready to drop here in November. So I thought I'd start doing some of these kind of meta breakdowns, kind of going over what's happening. Let me know down in the comments below if this is something you'd like to see. If you have any comments or questions about it, go ahead and leave a comment. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with everything that I'm posting. It really helps out the channel. And let's get to it. So starting with the standard challenge on 10/25, we had Golgari midrange putting up 11 copies in the top 32, followed by Domain with 5, Demir midrange with 6, Jeskai Convoke with 2, Gruul Prowess with 2, Orzhov midrange with 2, and then a couple one-ofs. So as really to no surprise, Golgari midrange is putting up the most numbers. This deck is getting played a lot. We've seen Golgari midrange kind of been popping up and poking out throughout, the last little bit. Kind of midrange settling as one of the better decks to play in standard. Same thing with the Demir midrange and Domain. Domain's kind of there to prey on the midrange deck. So if midrange doing well, Domain's there to try to prey on that and eat them. And then, the mid-range decks are keeping the aggro decks down, which allows Domain to do well because it has a terrible aggro matchup. So, overall, not too surprising with the first standard challenge. Mid-range kind of popping up, putting up 11 and 6 copies of the two different mid-range decks, respectively. Domain putting up 5 copies. Not too surprising overall. But going on to see what won the challenge was actually this blue-white, glyph deck, is what I'm calling it. It's kind of a weird little deck. So it has the elements here of the Convoke deck with, Novice Inspector, Spygrass Siren, Warren of the Inner Skies. And then we have Regal Button Core. It's kind of like our big payoff for having all these kind of little permanents around. We're playing the Glyph enchantment to make, our artifacts into 5/4s. We have Sheltered by Ghost as our kind of removal spell, along with Unidentified Hover Ship. Kind of just like this weird tempo-y blue-white control, or blue-white deck, not control, but weird blue-white tempo deck. Kind of surprising to see it actually take down the challenge. Definitely something I haven't seen a whole lot of, so it's interesting to see it do well as a whole. And then we had Boros Mice as well that did reasonably well in the challenge. I thought this was kind of interesting, kind of a different take on the whole Boros aggro type shell. It's playing the Valley Quest Caller as the Lord effect, essentially giving all of our mice +1/+1, and then whenever a mice enters the battlefield, you also get to scry one. You got, Heartfire Hero, Ember Heart Challenger, Manifold Mouse. All these cards are really good. I don't need to explain why they're good. So, not kind of surprising to see this deck do well as a whole, or just different take on the archetype as a whole. This is kind of something interesting to see in this first challenge. Moving on, going into the second challenge, or not the second challenge, but the next day, 10/26, we had Gruul Prowess decided to show up this time, putting 7 copies in the top 32, followed by Golgari midrange at 5, Domain at 4, the Azorius Oculus deck coming back with 4, Demir midrange with 2, Orzhov midrange with, Demir midrange with 3, Orzhov midrange with 3, this Rug combo deck with 2 copies and a couple one-ofs. So again, nothing too surprising. We had Golgari midrange, Azorius Oculus, Demir midrange. All these are kind of more midrange style decks. Domain putting up 4 copies, but Gruul Prowess wanted to remind everybody that aggro is not dead in the format. Gruul is still here. It's still very powerful. We saw it do well in Worlds as a whole. People were playing a lot of it. Not too surprising. The deck is a very powerful deck. It's kind of like the red-black Prowess deck that runs around in Pioneer. Is a very powerful deck. It can just kill you out of nowhere. So a little bit surprising to see Gruul kind of just pop up, not out of nowhere, but we saw last challenge it just put up basically no numbers. This time it put up 7 copies. It was the most played deck, or had the most copies in the top 32. That being said, Jeskai Convoke did end up winning the whole tournament, or winning the whole challenge here. Nothing too surprising in this list. There's nothing really super different or new. Playing some Shelters by Ghost, that's a little bit of a new invention. Or a little bit of new stuff with the deck. Having 1 Disdainful Stroke in the sideboard, also kind of different. But nothing crazy. There's no major challenge or changes to this deck. No major whoa, they're playing this. I would have never seen this coming. It's your simple low to the ground aggressive deck that, makes a wide board, makes you have to deal with it. Sweepers aren't very prevalent right now in the format, so it makes sense why this deck is doing well. And then here is the Rug combo deck, which if you watched anything of Worlds, I know they talked about this deck a lot. I'm probably going to do deck tech about this deck as well, because it's a very interesting type deck. We're playing Valley Flood Caller, essentially, so it gives, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, your birds, frogs, otters, rats, you control get +1/+1, and you untap them. So that, combined with the Enduring Vitality, gives all your creatures able to tap for any 1 mana of any color. All your creatures are tapping for mana. You're playing all the cute creatures. You're playing otters and stuff like that, so they're on untap. So you're almost setting up like this pseudo Jeskai. Crap, I forget the card's name, but it's a Jeskai enchantment. I'll think of it here in a second, but you're setting up like this whole type thing to just pump up your creatures and kill your opponent in one big shot here. And you have Towards the Towers, you have Sleight of Hand, just kind of turning through the deck type thing, removal spells to get it all going. So just a cool little take on this like kind of combo-y build. I think it's a really interesting deck overall, and it's definitely something that looks super fun to play. I haven't got to play it yet, but it's definitely something I want to put a little bit of time into and to kind of see how it all works out and works together for sure. But moving on to the second standard challenge on 10/26, we had Dimir Midrange putting up 10 copies overall, with Gruul Prowess with 7, Golgari Midrange with 3, Jeskai Convoke with 3, Boros Prowess with 2, Domain with 2, and then a couple different one-ofs. So again, not too surprising. Dimir Midrange is probably the best mid-range package you can play. I think going forward, it also has about 4 or 5 different takes. There's some combo versions of it with like the Dimir Demons deck that's running around. Then you have like the traditional mid-range deck, and then there's like more of a controlling element that's still mid-range deck. It has a lot of different takes, and none of the numbers seem to be correct. Someone's eventually going to figure out exactly what Dimir Midrange is supposed to be playing, and we'll get to that point eventually here. Gruul Prowess, again, making sure people know that, hey, we're still here. Golgari Midrange, more of a downtick overall. I think that people are learning that Dimir is a lot better, or at least better positioned, I think, overall. And then, of course, Jeskai Convoke, still doing up numbers, Boros Prowess still putting up numbers, and still 2 Domain. So, nothing too surprising. I do think Domain's poorly positioned as a whole in the format overall. I think that we're going to keep seeing Domain kind of go on the downtick as a whole. But we'll see how it all shakes out. But Dimir Midrange did end up winning the tournament as well, which is not too surprising when it put up so many numbers. Like I said, this is just one of the many variants you can play. This is just what this deck played as a whole, so I've seen these numbers change a lot. Some are playing no Mockingbirds, some are playing 3 or 4 Mockingbirds, some are playing the Flood Pits Drowner, some are playing none. The only thing that is for sure is a lot of them are playing Enduring Curiosity, Spygrass Siren, and Fairy Mastermind. Those are like the for sure cards that are always being played, along with, like the cut downs and the go for the throats type thing. But it's definitely just, hit or miss on what you're going to see, what you're not going to see. And then this is the Demon deck I was talking about, or like this combo type deck, essentially. So you have Doomsday Executioner, which costs 1,000,000 mana. It's 6 all black mana for a 6/6 flyer, but each player exiles their deck besides the top or the bottom 6 cards of the library. And so then we can combine that with Jace Perfected Mind, and we're playing Restless Reef. Sorry, not Relentless, Restless Reef. So when it attacks, you mill your opponent for 3 cards. So you're just going to end up killing your opponent because you're going to mill them out. That's kind of like your 1/2 combo, and then you're also playing the new Doors card, which lets you just stay ahead on value because you're playing the Doomsday, you're playing Archfiend of the Dross, which is a demon, and then also the door itself can make a demon. So you're just going to stay ahead on card advantage against your opponent. So more of a controlling version of the mid-range deck that we're seeing, because it has like that kind of combo aspect of it. But again, just another version of this Dimir style or Dimir pile essentially that we're seeing here. Moving on to 10/27, we are seeing, Golgari Midrange decided, hey, we're not dead yet, putting in 9 copies. And we have Dimir Midrange putting in 8 copies, Mono Red putting in 6. Kind of surprising, Mono Red just kind of popped up out of nowhere. I think this excuse me, I think this is the big reason to see the Mono Red push is because of the Magic Championship that was going on. There was that player who took Mono Red the only player playing mono red, and took it to a top 4 finish. So I think that's what pushed mono red into like put it on everyone's radar. Like, oh, I should be playing mono red. Gruul Prowess still putting up 3, and then a couple of different 1-ofs as well. That being said, the that combo deck is back. It did take first place. It only had 1 copy in the top 32, but it was able to take down the tournament. Definitely some different numbers have changed in this as a whole. This is playing 2 up the beanstalk type thing, or up the beanstalks. Some of the cards have changed, and now the sideboard's changed for sure. So this, again, not too surprising to see this deck do well. I think it catches a lot of people off guard. They're not really sure how to beat it as a whole. So it's definitely something you want to take a look at if you're going to be playing in your RCQs this coming season. I think this deck is here to stay. Obviously, barring what happens in Foundations, because I know that's bringing a whole mess of cards to Standard, and I'm real excited for it. And then we also had a Gruul Delirium deck that was made, I think, top 16, top 17 in the tournament. Just another like kind of cool homage. I think it's cool that, you know, Delirium is seeing play in Standard. There's enough ways to kind of trigger that. Obviously, you know, Delirium's not that hard to trigger when you get to like Modern, and even Pioneer is not as challenging because you have, you know, the ability to do all that. You have the ability to fill up your graveyard, especially in Modern. You know, you're playing, you know, you play fetch lands, things like that. You just easily fill up your graveyard. So I think this is cool to see this deck kind of like start to come out. Is this deck amazing? I don't know. I'm not super sure that this deck is like the best thing to be doing, but it is something to be playing and, you know, to look out for at least. And then we had one more. We had the Standard Qualifier. So this one's a little bit more of a high-profile tournament. You need to have qualifier points to be able to enter it, as well as, you know, winning this, or I think it's might be top 2, gets an invite to the next RC. So notably, Mono Red came out in full force with 11 copies in the top 32. Gruul Prowess with 6, Dimir Midrange with 5, Kagari Midrange with 4, Azorius Oculus with 4, Jeskai Convoke with 1, and the Rug Combo Deck with 1. And I think this is a much more indication of what you're going to see going to any kind of bigger tournament or any more of the RCQs. I think that you're going to see a lot more aggro in the 2 mid-range decks, Dimir and Golgari, and then the Oculus deck, of course, will still be there. But I think this is kind of more of a rendition of what you can expect to see moving forward, especially with, you know, what we have as of right now. Now, obviously, when Foundations comes out here in November, I'm sure we're going to have to see some shakeups. I think aggro's still going to be good. There's never really a time when attacking and doing direct damage is bad, so I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. That being said, Mono Red did take down this tournament, which is not too surprising. You know, we're seeing 4 Heartfile Hero, 4 Hired Claw, 4 Monstrous Swifter. That's 12 1-drops we have for turn 1. Then we have the Manifold Mouse and the Emberheart Challenger as our 2-drops, along with Screaming Nemesis as our 3-drops, and then Monstrous Rage because that's an amazing card, and then Shock and Lightning Strike to kind of deal damage to them and burn them out. Also playing the 4 Rockface Village to be able to trigger our Valorant on, you know, Heartfire and Emberheart Challenger. Just a great way. Notably, we're playing Witchstalker Frenzy as our removal spell, which also combos with Screaming Nemesis. So if you need to do, like, you know, 5 damage to your opponent just to win, you can do that by just targeting Screaming Nemesis with Frenzy, and it will deal the 5 damage, and you can redirect that 5 damage to your opponent's face. Super cool little interaction there. But yeah, pretty straightforward deck, not too surprising on it doing well at all. And then this is kind of the overall arcing we had from this weekend. We had 32 Golgari mid-range decks overall through all these challenges and qualifier. We had 28 Dimir mid-range decks. We had 25 Gruul Prowess decks, 19 Mono Red decks, 11 Domain decks, 9 Oculus decks, 8 Jeskai Convoke decks, 6 Orzhov mid-range decks, 5 of the Rug Combo decks, 3 Boros Prowess, 3 of the Azorius like enchantment style decks, and then a couple different 1-ofs there. So what does this all mean? Yes, like, so what can we take from this information? What can we do with this information? What are we trying to gather here? Basically, we're trying to get an idea of what we can expect going into an RCQ, what you need to look out for, what are we worried about as a whole. So I think it's very safe to say that if you're looking to go into an RCQ, you need to have your game plan essentially for the Golgari mid-range decks and the Domir mid-range decks, as well as the aggro. You need to have some kind of game plan for both. You can't just go in there like, man, I have a great aggro matchup, Aggro doesn't have a chance against me. You're gonna get stopped by all the mid-range decks that are running around. Same thing goes for you can't be like essentially domain, where like I can beat the mid-range deck. It doesn't matter what they're playing, what they draw. My subpar hands are better than their best hands. It's like, that's great. Mono red just killed you on turn 3. I'm glad you played your deck that beats mid-range. Doesn't feel good. So it is something you're gonna have to figure out what you're doing and what to do. That being said, I don't think there's an overall best deck at the time. I don't think there's any one deck that you're losing percentage points because you're not taking it to your tournaments. That being said, I think Mono Red's probably one of the better decks. As a whole, it does what the Black Red Prowess deck does in Pioneer, where it stumbles you, or it punishes you for stumbling. If you stumble, you make a mistake, you have one too many tap lands, that's great. I'm going to kill you. I'm glad you got to play your tap lands. They look cool. By the way, take 10. Type deal, where it's just like you're putting so much pressure on them, they have to have answers after answers, and then you can play that a little bit of a long game in the game 2 and 3 with your sideboard tech. So I do think that it's honestly up to whatever you want to play. Like I said, you got to be prepared for the aggro, and you got to be prepared for the mid range. You got to have a game plan. Game plan against both of them. You can't just sit there and go, I'm going to be really good against the mid-range decks and then get stomped by the aggro decks. And you can't be, I'm really good against the aggro decks and get stomped by the mid-range decks. You got to come to some conclusion. Maybe you have to, concede some kind of points on some way or the other. But it is a deck. There isn't a one best deck, I think, is what we can gather from this for sure. I think that we can gather that, mid-range is very powerful, but aggro is right next to it. It's not putting up any, it's not slouching by any means. We look at the top 3 decks are 32, 28, 25. That's not, leaps and bounds from the next ones. So, but this is something I'm going to try to do, after each weekend. I want to try to gather as much data as I can. Just kind of compile it, explain it, go over my thoughts as how the meta is breaking down and what's changing, what's happening to it. If you guys want to see more of this, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, leave a like. Let me know what you think about this kind of style in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys next time.